Hi, my name is Bree and I'm the Director of Communications and Press for the Allegheny Student Government.
Hello, my name is Abdi Lugundi, President of Allegheny Student Government.
Hello, my name is Jack Ohrman. I'm a photographer, filmmaker based out of Pittsburgh, and I graduated at Allegheny in 2017.
It is now 7:21. We are going to begin the session. I ask that anybody who joins after this, please mute their mics and turn their cameras off. Thank you. I'm also going to turn mine off. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
So I went to Allegheny and graduated in 2017, like I said. And when I went, it was kind of like, I didn't know what I was going to major in. I knew it wasn't going to be art, and that was about it. Fast forward 4 years later, I graduated with a degree in environmental studies and studio art. So that kind of changed a little bit. And then the last week of senior year, I decided to make videos just for document the week and graduation and all of that. And then I just didn't stop. I was like, oh, I really like this medium. I really like this. So literally haven't stopped since making videos. And I did the daily vlog kind of thing for a while, and then switched to actual professional work. And then photography has just been something I've always been interested in. Took a couple photography classes, and I guess technically that was my focus with studio art, but I took photography and painting and ceramics and all kinds of different other stuff. My senior project was a robot, so nothing to do with video or photography at all. And then got down to Pittsburgh, and I was like, I want to do video. That's whatever it was. That was what I felt that I had to do. So was applying to whatever job I could find, and whoever was offering, and actually found my first job through an ad on Instagram, and worked with those people for a while. And then through that met somebody who I work with a lot and do kind of regular work with now. I've been doing that ever since, and doing my own stuff on the side, and photography and video as well.
And can you tell me a little bit about where you are right now? I see you're in a studio.
Yeah, so right now we're somewhere in Massachusetts at Jacob's Pillow. We're on location for a week or two, doing a documentary about a dance company, and the whole process behind what goes into making a evening length dance, an hour-long performance, and all the kind of behind the scenes stuff. So that's where we are now. That's why it looks like a studio, because it is a studio.
And I'm aware that you've won a couple awards for some of the films that you've done. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually both of those are, the big ones are this year, and definitely did not expect that. I mean, I've only been doing this for 2.5, 3 years. So wasn't expecting anything like that. And the first one we got was for a telly. It was won the gold telly, and that was for a project that we did with Aaron Donald. He had a camp back in Penn Hills in Pittsburgh, and so we filmed that and did kind of a recap of the camp and what his whole mission and philosophy is. And so that one got the gold telly. And then the other project that we actually won an Emmy for was a commercial for the Boys and Girls Club of Pittsburgh. It was their annual campaign video. Their campaign that year was Remember, Reimagine, Reinvest. And so there's a couple different Boys and Girls Club centers in Pittsburgh, and went and shot at them and worked with some artists in Pittsburgh. And I did the editing on that and some of the filming. So those are the two big ones that happened this year, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge, huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I've heard a little bit, and I've also seen on your Instagram that you've been traveling kind of around the United States, filming a lot of the protests that are going on. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Where have you traveled? How long have you been traveling?
Yeah, so traveling in general, I've always enjoyed travel and like to do that. With the protests specifically, most of my work is from Pittsburgh, since that's where I live, and that's the community I'm in, and where it's most readily available to document. But we had a couple of cool opportunities to travel to document other protests. One of them, we went with a group out of Pittsburgh called One Hood, and they do a lot of art and activism, a lot of hip hop artists, but everything's with that activist focus. We do a lot of work with them, and we went with them and with Antoine Rose's mother down to Louisville. She's actually the One Hood people and Miss Michelle, who's Antoine's mother, know the group that's in Louisville right now, Until Freedom, which they're actually based out of New York, but they're staying in Louisville until they actually get justice for Breonna. And they reached out to Miss Michelle and said, we need support. She said, what do you need? You need food, water, resources, like, what is it? And they said, we have everything. We need people, like we need bodies on the ground. And she said, all right, let's go. So we rolled down with them and were able to document that. They had a direct action. So it was one where people went anticipating that they would be getting arrested. So they knew like what to do and how to act, to be civilly disobedient, but also not escalate anything to an unnecessary point, and marched down through a neighborhood, stopped in front of the Churchill Downs where they have the horse races, and then a bunch of police came up, and then at first they were sitting there and it looked like that's kind of where it was going to end, and then they decided to get up, move down, and then try to make it over this bridge, and the cops made a line and were like, yeah, you guys aren't going past this. And so those activists sat down there and were ultimately arrested. And that was kind of a like interesting thing because it was just a bridge. Like they didn't anticipate that there would be such a show of force there. And we were on the bridge, and I'm trying to get pictures and stuff, and there's people trying to bring water up to the front and stuff like that. And then the riot police are closing people in and boxing off certain areas. And then we eventually got off the bridge before a lot of the people got arrested, but there wasn't any like tear gas or anything like that day. But it was very different in Louisville compared to what's in Pittsburgh, and but also like a lot of similarities too. Like obviously they're fighting for Breonna and everybody else, and so everybody in Pittsburgh, and so there's those similarities, and the topics are the same. We could have conversations with people, and it's like you knew a lot about them because you're fighting for the same things, and it doesn't matter if you're in different states and it looks different, it's still the same cause, which was pretty cool to see. And then the following week was the March on Washington, and the guy I work with, Ime Alaquiva, I was like, we got to go down. Like this is going to be the march. Like, let's go. He was like, word, let's go. So we went down, and with the other guy who's here, Matt Metrovich, we went down and didn't have much of a plan. We're just going to go and see what we see and film and take pictures. And that was a really powerful experience. And it wasn't even an event. It was bigger than an event. There was actually a point where like we all split up, and I'm at what I thought was the front of the protest group. And then we go, like, it was supposed to go to the MLK statue. It went past that, and I was like, oh, there's like thousands of people like still going. So this probably just be the front. They're just going to like march around and then come back. Well, we went like down to the museums and like the mall and stuff. I got halfway down. I was like, I don't think this is the right group. Like, like it was a group and everything, but there's just so many people there, which was really awesome to see.
I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of talked about, the Antoine Rose mother, Miss Michelle, dealing with, the protests that have been happening, since
Mm-hmm.
that event, have you been involved with any documenting or, talking with any groups? I know One Hood has been like,
Mm-hmm.
The main project leader, fighting for his justice, and, settling everything down, and, kind of being, the platform for Miss Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
And, many other activists, that are trying to fight for equality in Pittsburgh. Can you just kind of talk more about that, or just, kind of like what you know?
Yeah. So like you said, there's been a lot with One Hood and with her, and then with the group Rock Nation, which is Jay-Z's foundation. So they've been given a lot of support and stuff like that. And a lot of what we've been doing, and this is all from the dude who I work with, Ime, and the company, the Mom's House. But we've been filming like, they'll have like birthday parties, like celebrations of his life every year. So we'll film stuff like that and interviews with Miss Michelle, and she's not one for the spotlight. So it's a very delicate process, and like such a great human being and great soul. And it's kind of that, like, she's not someone you can just run up on and put the camera in her face and be like, all right, what's everything? What do people got to do? Like, give us the answers, because you're not going to get it. Like, so it's more that slow, like building that relationship over time, and doing these little things and going down with her, documenting it for her, but for the cause, and to try and hopefully get justice. But yeah, we've done some commercials and commercial type stuff, and then those like recaps of different events. They had this year march that went from, it was like decently sized march in East Pittsburgh, and then wound up pretty close, a couple blocks from where he was, and they had performances and everything, and pretty sure this one was on his birthday, and just like trying to celebrate his memory and not let his murder go taint his reputation or anything like that.
I'm a little bit interested because you mentioned how kind of going into film and going into photography has kind of opened these pathways for you to communicate with these peoples. You know, in your opinion, had you not have become so well-versed in photography, had you not have become, you know, a filmmaker, would you have these opportunities, or would you have taken that opportunity if it was presented to you?
That's a great question. I definitely don't think I would have had the opportunities to begin with. If I did, I would have taken them, but I don't think I would have had them, because there's a lot of like I grew up in Mount Lebanon, which is like prominently white and more well off. And it's like not a lot of struggle or anything like that. And then went to Allegheny College, and which was great education and everything, but like without having that avenue, that tool to document something, and that value, like if I just showed up as me, it'd be like, okay, cool, Jack's here, but like, what's good? Like there's no like further thing, but having those skills to take the pictures and document and know how to tell stories. I find myself in a lot of spaces that I wouldn't be otherwise. This is one of them. I'm not a dancer, and wouldn't be in a dance facility documenting. We've been doing this for now 2 years, this project. That's all because of the documentary work and the camera, and that being a vehicle to get into different spaces. And that is definitely true with the protests and social justice issues as well.
And out of all the photos that you've taken and out of all the places that you've visited, you know, which was the most impactful for you?
Ooh, that's a good one. There's one I sent Abdi a little bit before, and I didn't post it on purpose. Like, you can show it on here. But it was one that I took, and when I shoot like at a protest, it's from the traditional, like, well, no, it varies, but a lot of times I go in with the traditional photojournalist philosophy, where it's like you go and you just take pictures of what you see. You can frame stuff, and you can get different angles and use different lenses to get different effects in different moments, but you're not telling somebody, oh, hey, can you stand over here or hold this sign over here? And that's a totally good way to do photography, but I like to capture like what's actually happening. And this one picture, one of the activists there, we were in Market Square, if anybody's familiar with Pittsburgh, and some guy who was just some drunk Pittsburgher came in, wasn't wearing a mask, and the protest security was like, yo, you got to put on a mask, like you can't be around all these people. And he just wasn't having it, and crowd kind of gathered, and then he started getting combative with some people. They pushed him away. Eventually, after far too long, the police came and arrested him. But in Pittsburgh, so you have civil affairs, like all of these are the police department, but there's civil affairs, which they wear just like polos, pretty lightweight. Like the idea is that they're the liaison to the community, and then the actual like fully uniformed police. And then in the protest scene, there's also the motorcycle police, which they do traffic. That's what they're supposed to do. But they sometimes like to get aggressive and use their motorcycles as a way to move people, which I don't personally think is the most effective way to do that. And the times that they have done that, it doesn't seem to be a effective or responsible strategy. But so the civil affairs were the people who took this one drunk dude out. They took him, and then people started continuing on like down the street, and then the motorcycle police come up. They're blaring their sirens, like nobody can hear anything, revving their engines. They're like running into people. And it was this whole thing. And then they finally leave. And I have a video, I don't think it's online anywhere, but of the motorcycles, they got split up. So the protest parts ways to let the motorcycles out. After that, the riot police show up and come out like at the intersection. They come in their two lines and they come out, and usually what they'll do, they'll show up and just be forceful, like they do what they call a show of force, just to try and intimidate people and say, oh, if you keep this up, like we're going to use more tactics, but just trying to do that intimidation thing at first. And we were still having the sirens, so it was still hard to hear. Nobody really knew what was going on. But this one activist, they sit down, and I have, when it's a situation like that, I try to do video on my phone to capture video of what's happening and then take pictures with my camera. So I have the video going, I'm taking pictures with my camera, and I see them sitting on the ground, and they had a megaphone and like go over, and they're framed perfectly within the two lines of the riot police. And in the middle, you can see them talking on the microphone or the megaphone. And it was one of those images that's like framed perfectly, and you could set it up and stage it and everything, but it was just an organic moment. And so to me, I'm really proud of that one. There's a lot of others, but that's probably the one that I'm most proud of, that I can think of, just because the whole story, and like, it's an image that's like too perfect, but it also was just in the moment, trying to be at the right place at the right time kind of thing.
And you've mentioned extensively that you went to these protests. You were actually with the people, and I know the photo that we used for the graphic is actually you in the crowd too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was necessarily taken at one of the protests, but it just shows how close you are with the individuals that you're working with. Even if you don't know them personally, you're still side by side. And that means that you would have firsthand experience on, you know, what the protest was really like. And I know a lot of the media, we've seen a lot of the graphic images, we've seen a lot of the looting. You know, can you tell me what it was actually like for you and for the events that you attended?
Yes, I haven't personally been at a protest that has resulted in like overt police brutality or like tear gas or anything like that. But there was one in particular, I think is a perfect example of the disparity of what the media portrayal is and then what actually happens. So this one, I forget the date for it, but it was downtown Pittsburgh, and where everybody's doing stuff downtown. We go down Penn Ave. There's restaurants out there, so there's people eating. It was a nice day, and some people started harassing some of the protesters, and naturally they get upset about that and start saying stuff back, and it's like a whole back and forth kind of thing. And it's the video. It went it went very viral. The president actually retweeted it. There's a video of one of the protesters drinking someone's beer off their table, and the way that video is framed, like it looks like they just took it and that was it. But leading up to that, like someone had grabbed their breast, someone had pulled their hair, and done all these like actual physical assaults to this person, and they didn't physically fight back. They yelled at them and they cussed them out for sure, but they didn't physically respond to that. So then they got that one gentleman out of the way, and these other people were yelling stuff, just terrible things, like, oh, Black lives don't matter, and all lives matter, all this kind of stuff. And so that was obviously upsetting people. And then this lady is like, oh, if you want, like, I'll buy you a beer, like it's cool, like let's talk about it. And the protester was like, I don't have time to like sit down and wait for one to be ordered. I'll take this one. And that's why they drank it, from my understanding. But so while all this was going on, I see the dude that they just kicked out. So I'm running down, like you can see me in the video running past it. It was such a small thing that me being there with the intent to document what was going on, I missed it as I ran past, and I turned around and I saw like some yelling. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And then we keep moving on. Fast forward to the next day, I make my post. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what to say. It's like, oh, it was a peaceful protest. Kind of just something simple like that. After I post my stuff, I see all those videos come out. I'm like, and everybody's like, oh, it was a riot. Oh, it was this, it was that. They were violent. Like, oh, these BLM protesters, they come in and destroy the city, and downtown isn't safe. And I was like, huh? Like, I was there, like that wasn't the experience at all. Like maybe that was one small snippet of it, but the rest of it was peaceful. Like the color, those were put on by a group called BYE, Black, Young, and Educated, and they had a color of the day. So that color of the day was pink for love, and the whole protest was about love, and that's a lot about what they talked about that day. So it's kind of ironic that the one day that they focus and talk about love is also the day that one incident gets blown out of proportion and makes it seem like this whole thing's a riot, which would be the farthest thing from the truth. It continued on for, I would say that was probably about the halfway point, and it continued on as long as had gone on before that. Again, peaceful people chanting, marching in the streets, like obviously upset. So there's a little frustration and anger there, but nothing violent, no burning or anything like that. And this is the same in Louisville and DC. Like people are upset because they should be. Like if you're not upset, then you're not paying attention. But it's also controlled, and it's a lot of people know what those limits are and what can and can't be done. And there was some study, I think someone looked at that data. It's like actually like 96 or 98% of the protests over the summer have been peaceful, but that doesn't get media attention. Like I've posted, I don't even know how many protest photos and been to dozens and dozens of protests. And the video that has significantly more views than anything else is of a police officer knocking down some lady for just standing there. So it's like, and that protest even was peaceful, but the stuff that gets the attention is the stuff that's either there's like some kind of violence or something like that going on. And that's what people see. And then you think that's everything when it's actually just a very small part.
And, you know, that's something that kind of saturates the media, especially summer. That's kind of all we saw. We never got to see more peaceful aspects of it. It was always just look at what's going on behind me. And even when the reporter would say like, no, it's actually peaceful, they would show the video of where it wasn't peaceful, and it kind of contradicted a little bit. So in your opinion, and I know you touched on it a little bit, but why would the media do that? Why would they portray it in such a negative light?
That's a really good question. You know, I don't know why they would do that. Well, so they're all like, any mainstream media now is privatized. So they run it as a business, and businesses need to make money and they need to be profitable. So that's what the news is now. Like the news needs to be profitable. And so they're going to seek out content and pursue content that people eat up, and that kind of stuff people eat up. And if they're posting the happy, peaceful stuff, like people aren't going to view that and share that as much. So I think it's just out of self-interest in a lot of instances, for them to get views and have people on it. And there was even whenever I got the video of the one lady being knocked over, a couple of the news outlets reached out, and one of them was like asking a couple of questions and then just never followed up, because I was like, no, this was a peaceful protest. They did everything they said. And they're like, okay, yeah, thank you. And then just never called me back. I was like, okay, cool. Like whatever. Let the video speak for itself. But I think a lot of it's self-interest. But yeah, other than that, I don't know why, because it's not what's actually happening. And there's also, yeah, there's also, I forget what I was going to say there. But, oh, well, no. So there's a couple news outlets in Pittsburgh that were soliciting for photos of protests, that they in the solicitation, they said, oh, send us your photos. We'll send them to the police. I was like, you can't do that. Like as like media, you're supposed to be as impartial as possible, but like you're just there to show what's happening. Especially in this instance, if you start sending stuff to the police, like you're taking a side, you're supporting them, and they already have all the resources and everything, and they're the ones causing all the problems that people are protesting for. And so it's like there's some connection there too, where they're trying to support the police or like work with them or something, which just inherently goes against the protesters. But yeah, for a deeper why other than money, I don't know.
And I'm going to pull up some of your images now because I think this is a great segue to kind of
Okay.
talk. So I'm going to screen share. Bear with me. I'm like not too advanced with Zoom.
Oh, no worries. Take your time.
I think I got it. You should see. Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm going to present it. And then we can go through photo. Just kind of like tell me a little bit about, if you remember the dates, that's cool. I've obviously taken a lot of photos and visited a lot of places. Kind of, you know, as you were there in that moment, what did you feel? What was it like?
Yeah, so this protest was one of the more recent protests. There was, I think, 16 protests on every Saturday. They were called Civil Saturdays, and they were put on by the Black Young and Educated group. And then for a number of reasons, they said they were done, but that they would continue to be activists and continue to support the community and host their own events and stuff. This was an event that was a uncivil Saturday. So it's in the evening. The uncivil name is more just like they're not going to do anything that's illegal. Like, interesting story about this protest in a bit, but it's just to be disruptive and to make like do stuff so that people have to pay attention and they have to say, well, wait, why are these people out here protesting on a Saturday night? Like, what's going on? What's the issues? And then to try and raise awareness. So that's the whole like idea of the uncivil Saturday. And this one, pulled up my Instagram because I put the dates on all of them. So this one was on September 26th, and it's in Oakland, where Pitt is and stuff. And it was very calm, like a very calm protest. And they made a point like, we're going to follow every rule. We're going to stay on the sidewalks. They waited until the light changed to cross. And usually in Pittsburgh, it's like you just take the street and then march on the street, and that's just is what it is. But some people have issues with that, and so they were like, no, we're going to follow everything. Like, there's a couple pictures from that day where you can see like a line of people down the sidewalk because it's only so wide, so you only fit so many people. But yeah, this one, they literally waited for the walk sign to come on before they went across. And at one point, someone was banging on something, like a sign, and they stopped the protest and were like, yo, who did that? Like, that's not okay. We're not okay with that. Like, yeah, we're here to disrupt, and we're here to make sure people hear us and make a point and be heard, but not any destruction or any physical damage. So it was pretty neat. And I think this image like kind of speaks to that. It's like you're crossing the road, so there's that divisiveness, like you're that going counter to what is the norm, but also they're within the crosswalk, so it's within what's allowed, while you're still disrupting and whatnot.
And I noticed that the American flag is upside down. And I don't know if you know the purpose behind it, but if you do, could you like expand upon it?
Yeah, so I don't know the specific origins of this, but I know I'm pretty sure it dates back to like very early America, like pre-America times, when if you're in war and you're in distress, all the armies had flags, they carried flags. So if you're in distress, you carry the flag upside down to indicate to other people that you're in distress or you need help, or your allies and whatnot. And so that's why they bring this and have it upside down, is like America's in distress right now. As Tamika Mallory said in her speech right around when right after George Floyd was murdered, she said America is in a state of emergency, and that's 100% true, and it's still true. And so that's just a visual representation of like, we're in a state of distress in this country. We got to do something about it.
Okay, thank you. And then
this one is one, so I'm not sure which one this is. So there's a weekly protest in Pittsburgh, and right now they're going until the election. But it's changed names a variety of times, but it's all about trans visibility and Black trans visibility specifically, because there's like different levels of what things that people go through, and some of the worst off are Black trans women, and just the disrespect and the violence that they experience and whatnot. And so this one every Thursday now it is. I think this, I'm not sure. They were Wednesday, they moved to Thursday. But that's from one of these. And so they would go start at the city council building, go down through the city, and then end there. Well, that's what this one was from. And just trying to raise awareness. And it's a lot of times you'll be out and people are like, what is this? And you tell them, or I hear people tell just bystanders like what it is. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. Really? Like, that's an issue. And so a lot of it's for that, and just to be heard, because also like a lot of their voices are suppressed through different systemic racism and whatnot. So it's like they're basically showing up and saying, we're going to be heard, you're going to hear us. We can figure out what comes later, but we need to at least have a seat at the table.
Thank you. And then
oh, this is a good one. This was the last Civil Saturday. So I don't know how many people there, maybe 500. And this person, I actually don't know who this is. I hadn't recognized it from other protests. But we were just marching down, and it was kind of one of those like I'll see the image before I take it, and then it's like, okay, how can I get this image actually on the camera? And this was one of those, like, I saw them marching down like that. I was like, that's powerful, and they're right on the center line. I got to figure out how to capture it. So like, I think I was off on the side, like run up to the front and snap a couple of pictures really quick. And especially when you're marching, like you don't have time to stop and look and check. Oh, is this good? Oh, it's a little out of focus. You just have to get it and go. And so that was this one, and it came out good.
And I was always a little bit interested, like, how do you know when to take the picture? What about the image or what about the scene causes you to, click the button?
Mm-hmm. That's another good question. I don't know if it's nothing in particular, more just a feeling. So having been taking pictures and shooting for many years, I'm very comfortable with the camera and know how to quickly get it to do what I want it to do. So once you have that kind of as a base, and okay, if I do this and move this dial, then it'll look good in this lighting. And that's just kind of something that you learn over time. But then in terms of the actual like framing of the image and the composition, I tend to look for a scene. Like with this one, she was leading in front, fist up, very powerful stance, dressed very well. And so I see that, and then it's like, okay, how can I best capture this in a single frame? And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll just go and like fire a bunch and have kind of a framing in mind, but kind of shoot a bunch of pictures, as many as I can get in a short period of time. And then on the back end, when I'm going through them, like you find the one that's the image or the right framing and everything. But it's really just a matter of like being in the moment. And I like to say a lot of what I do, and especially protests, is participatory photography or participatory filmmaking. And I learned that phrase from one of my biggest inspirations, a guy named Jimmy Chin, who does a lot of climbing and adventure photography and filmmaking. He was the director of the film Free Solo that came out a few years ago about a guy who climbed a cap without a rope, which is like 3,000 foot tall wall without a rope, which is insane. But he does, like, his whole thing is participatory, and it has to be, because you can't just go up 2,000 feet on a wall and then be like, okay, I'm done for the day. Like, you have to be a part of it. And that's what I try and do. And so I try and just be in a state where I'm listening and looking and just observing, and, okay, what's going on? What are people saying? What's the atmosphere? And then let that tell me what images to capture.
And does that also help you write your captions? Because I know you write pretty extensive captions to go with the photos as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the captions, it's a constantly evolving thing, because as a white dude, like, I feel my voice isn't the first voice that should be in this space. There's other voices, and I try and use, that's what I like about the photography, is it's a way to amplify other voices. So a lot of times I just try and be like this is what happened and this is what it was, or I'm listening and picking up what they're saying and then amplify that message even more. So yeah, that is directly responsible for a lot of the captions.
Thank you. Look at this one.
Oh, this one was from DC, and this was actually that moment where you can't see it in here, but just past the trees is the MLK statue on the left side, or the monument. And this was the group that went past the monument. And so obviously that looks like the main body of the protest. And we're about to be on a bridge here. So I'm up on like the bridge embankment, like on the side of the bridge to get that aerial perspective. But I was like, oh, all these people are going that way. Like that must be the way the whole protest is going. But it just shows how many people were there. But I thought this one was powerful because it's as anywhere there could be a person, there was a person. And everybody has their mask on and everything. But this was just after that statue, and I was like, okay, we're moving along and trying to just show how many people were there, because there's a lot.
And when you like go to the protest, I know you mentioned you take a couple people with you. So how many people went with you to the DC protest? And were you all filming or all taking photos in this like moment?
Yes and no. So the DC protest in particular was 3 of us, was Ime, Matt, and myself. And Ime had cameras, I had cameras, and Matt was running audio. Ime does a lot of video too, more video, I think. In the protest, I do more photography. We do both, but audio is so important in video. You can have a great video visually. If the audio sucks, then people don't want to listen to it. You can have a kind of crappy video, but if the audio is good, then people will listen to it. So that's why it was important to capture that. And but at this point, we were all separated because the march had just started. There was a lot of speeches leading up to it in the day, and then we were like, okay, let's go get as much coverage. Like the intention was to spread out. So Ime was actually at the statue and was able to get up on stage with the Reverend Al Sharpton and MLK III. And then I was at this point. So yeah, we're all documenting different aspects of the march and from different spaces.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that one.
This one. So this was after, like, this is where I'm starting to figure that like we might not be going to the MLK monument. But I was like, I need to document like where we are and all of that. And so this one, I sometimes you see the scene like I was describing earlier, and then it's like, how do I document that scene? And this one, it was like, I know what the frame's going to be, and it was more of a waiting game to get the flag and those kind of elements and the other people in it. So we're there, and you have the mall and the Capitol building. It's like, this is a powerful frame, and it'd be very powerful to have the protesters walking right by the Capitol for a number of reasons. And so this was, I took a couple. I wound up waiting maybe probably about 5 minutes here. Once I had it framed up, and just wait for the right moment to pass and hope you get the image.
And this in particular is extremely striking. So as you're looking at it, and I know you mentioned the waiting game, this is going to be a little guesstimation just so I can understand a little bit about it. But how long did you stand there to get this image?
I'd say it was probably a 10-minute process for this image, because marching up, like, you can see, I could tell that frame was going to be there as we were getting closer to it. And then I got there and I was like, okay, this is the frame. So I got it set up. And at this point, I was like kind of far, like a little bit ahead of the main body of the protest. And so sometimes I'll do that and try and run a little bit ahead and get something set up and then wait, let people pass. And it's like a workout, like running back and forth and trying to be at the front and in the back and everywhere all the time. But so I did have a little bit of time before the main group of people caught up. But yeah, I'd say from when I saw that this could be an image in my mind to when I actually took this picture, it was probably about 10 minutes. And then a lot of times once I get the image, like I know I have it, just subconsciously, I'm like, okay, I snap the frame and I'm like, okay, I got it, let's move on. That was the case with this one. This is the last one I took it and said, okay, hope everything's in focus, let's move on.
And can you explain a little bit about why framing the image is so important to create that more powerful and striking image?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with photography, you have um, only so many elements that you can work with. Like you can make an image of anything, but you have the exposure, so how bright or how dark the image is, and all of these things are different ways to communicate a message. Also, you have the actual exposure of the image, um, and then you have the framing of the image, and then you have the composition of the image, and the framing and the composition are kind of related. But that's what actually tells the story. This image would be very different if that flag was over her shoulder, or if they were carrying it lower, or if the Capitol building was smaller, or there was more or less people. And so I get really excited when I find an image that's framed in a way that tells the story that I think needs to be told, and that's what this one was for me, where it was like Black Lives Matter on top of everything, because it's just they do, like it's fact. And then you have the government body, which like there's some overlap to it, but they're still behind it, like they're not as important. It's okay. And then all the people supporting this system, like the people support the system. I mean, it says in the founding documents, like the government of the people, for the people, by the people. And so that is communicated because of the framing and because of where the people are and where the flag is and where the buildings are. And if you change that, you change what message you're communicating.
Thank you. And then this one?
Yeah, this one, it was before the march started. So they had a lot of speakers and stuff. And we were at the World War II Memorial. There was actually a group of protesters from Pittsburgh who, once they saw we were down there, they're like, oh, we're down here too, like let's meet up. So we met up with them and a group of local DC protesters. And we were all kind of hanging out here waiting for stuff to start and the march to get going and everything. And I actually climbed up on one of the pillars to get this perspective and just to try and show how many people were there, because it was a whole lot of people, and even more than are in this image. And the reflecting pool is an iconic installation, I guess you could say, in America. And the Lincoln Memorial obviously has a lot of history to it. So that's another thing I'm thinking about too, is like there's a lot of people that have taken a lot of pictures. So most pictures aren't new, but it's a new experience and a new event. And there's probably images like this from the March on Washington back in the 60s. So I'm thinking about that historical context as well when I'm shooting, and it's how can I get something it's a modern time, but also harkening back to the people that came before.
And especially because the protest, before it began, they gathered in front of the Lincoln Memorial in particular.
Mm-hmm.
You talk a little bit about the impact of, understanding what the history of the Lincoln Memorial is, what the history of President Lincoln is, and then also going into what they're fighting for today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much relevance. Like you'd hope that we'd be farther along by now, but I remember having a specific moment in one of the first protests that I was at, and like I like history, so I'm like kind of a nerd that way. But I was like, wow, this is pretty wild. Like we're chanting the same things that they were chanting back in the 60s, and we're like, obviously it's different in different people. It looks different, and some improvements have been made, but it's like there's like I felt a real connection to that historical piece. And in Pittsburgh, a big center of protests is Freedom Corner, and there's a huge history with that and fighting just to have it be a monument and be a space. Was a big fight that a lot of people now don't know about. I don't even know the whole story behind it, but I know that a lot of people put a lot of work in to make that a space. And recently, it's been used as a gathering space. And Miss Danielle Brown has been doing her hunger strike there. She left there few weeks ago, but that was she lived there because she was trying to find out why her son died when there were multiple security officers in his room. Like, why did he die? And stuff just didn't add up. So she was doing that there, and it's like, this fight's not isolated to this time period. I'm reading a book now about kind of the history of racism stamped from the beginning, and like, this has been going on for a long time, and there's been a lot of people in our history who've been intentionally trying to develop, make, and advance racist ideas. And so the fight's going to be a long fight to totally get rid of it. And it's like, we're just a dot on that timeline of history. But it's definitely important to look back and what's been done before, and then also look forward to what could be in the future.
Thank you. And then I have this one as well.
Yeah. Oh, so this is a great one. This was actually the same day as the video where the person's drinking the beer. And at this point, we're just marching down the street in a classic Pittsburgh fashion. There's a group of bicyclists who help with security on the perimeter. They can transport water, different snacks like that, especially at these in the summer. Like, it was hot and they would go far. I think the average for them was like 7 miles. Like, they were intense. So keeping people hydrated and fed was important. They were able to do that. You can see some of the bikers here. And then just the group of people, you got instruments and signs and everything. And then, there was a circle. So like, they'll circle up at intersections and stuff, but like 2 blocks up was where the beer incident happened and all of that. And as of right now, we're like, oh, it's just a nice day and a good march and a good day to fight for justice. And then also, kind of unrelated to that, but the gentleman on the right with the pink shirt and the blue shorts, that's the Ime guy who I do a lot of work with. But he's there snapping pictures right in the front.
Thank you. I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that this was the same day as the viral video that went out.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you a little bit, and I know we touched on it before, but why is it important to be present at the Black Lives Matter protest, or at any protest in general, to kind of show what's actually going on as opposed to what they like us to believe?
Yeah, so that's like what I try and do with all of them. I started going to them because I fly drones and have licenses to do that and to fly over people and whatnot, which is kind of not a lot of people have. So it's like, I have the ability, so let me show up and document that perspective. And then as I was there more, realized like, it's really important to document what's happening, because if you don't document it, and this is a me quote I gotta say, if you don't document it, it's like it never happened. And that could not be more relevant than with these protests. If you don't document it, people either, oh, I don't believe that, or, oh, what about all the looting and all the burning and stuff that's happening? I guess that's not happening. But really, is it? And it's like, no, it's really not happening. And all the narratives from the normal media, who they're basically the police, because you see them sitting over there talking with the police at protests. Like, they're not welcome at protests, because they do that because they ask for images to send to the police, because they send images to the police. They have their reporters show up in, oh, Police Lives Matter shirts. Like, literally, this happened at one of the protests. Like, this guy comes with a news camera and he has a police shirt on, and it's like, whatever your thoughts are, like, your thoughts are, like, I'm gonna have issues with that, but like, don't show up to a Black Lives Matter protest with a police shirt on and try and act like you're going to be an impartial judge and a documenter, because that's like, we were fighting police brutality and police violence, and it's like, if you're supporting the police, and you're just missing the whole purpose and the whole mission. So because of their actions and because of that at the beginning, like, they're not even welcome at the protests anymore, and so they have to shoot from across the street, and then they can't get everything, and make it a point to so people protest because they feel like their voice isn't being heard, or they're being oppressed or something. Like, if you have everything and you're set and you're living in the high castle, you have your mansion, you got your Gucci pants and whatnot, like you're not going to go out and protest probably. But like the news, they're not going to go out and protest because they have everything. Police haven't gone out and protested because they're sitting good. The people who protest, those are the people who aren't being heard and who have been silenced specifically. So I try and show up and I'm like, you guys are the ones who need more of a voice and more of a platform. So I try and do what I can with my platform to spread their voice, knowing that there's people out there doing the exact opposite.
This is a question that I typically ask at the very beginning of the podcast, but I hope that you would get to it at some point, and I think you have arrived to it. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about, besides Abdi reaching out, why did you come here today? Why did you accept to come and do a podcast with us?
Well, I like podcasts, and this is my first podcast that I'm on, so let's just like, that'll be cool. But the bigger reason is because I think this message is so important, and what's happening across America and across the world really needs to be spoken about and on the front pages and in everybody's ears. And yeah, it might be a little bit much, or people might be getting sick of hearing the same thing over and over again, but like you're hearing the same thing over and over again because nothing's actually changing. So when he reached out, I was like, hey, this is a great way to participate and do this and support you. And then also like, it's a great opportunity to talk a little bit further about what I do and then the issues pertaining to the movement and everything that's happening. And just to continue to get that perspective out there.
Thank you. And then I have these two.
Well, these are, yeah. So these are from DC. This was, let me see what the date was. I forget what the date was on these, but this was the day before the March on Washington. And it was also the final day of the Republican National Convention, which happened at the White House, which separate conversation, that's its own issues. And we got there and they did the fireworks and stuff. And it was like, it's a whole other thing. But there was, in the back of the image on the left where it's like yellow on the back, that's Black Lives Matter Plaza. So we got there and it was like a block party. There's people, DJs, and there's people cooking food, and there's protesters with megaphones chanting, and just like a, for what it was, as positive an environment as it could be, I think. There was obviously a police presence, some people antagonizing police and whatnot, but for the most part, just as a block party, basically. And so we started there, went around the side. There's a couple different skirmishes, and after the fireworks, and police come up, nothing too crazy that I witnessed. Then we're walking back, and I see that they're carrying this dude. I don't know what he did to deserve to be carried by 4 people and not even walk. But there was the paddy wagon, you can see him sitting in front of on the image on the right. And they carried him in, and they tried to just literally shove him into the back of this paddy wagon. And I'm not sure if this man, if he was had any substances, or if he was dehydrated or ill, like whatever it was, he was not well. Just in like a human standpoint, he needed to either sit and drink water or seek medical attention. So there's a lot of people out in the streets. People see that they're trying to shove this dude in, and they start saying like, get this dude an ambulance. And people start to gather, and they're like, this dude needs an ambulance. Like, you're trying to arrest him. Like, where's this? So all these chants start going, and more police show up, and they surround the scene. And eventually I think he did get medical treatment, but it was not for maybe 45 minutes from whenever they carried him over, and this first image was, to whenever they took him away to what we hope was medical attention. It was about like 45 minutes, and we were right outside of the White House. So it's not like there's not ambulances there. It's not like they couldn't get somebody there. Like, they just held him and tried to shove him in the back of this paddy wagon for that long. And there was actually one police officer who was there because they made a border of police so people couldn't get close to these guys. And it was a black police officer, and a black protester, and they're just giving him everything. They're like, you're a black man out here, like you take off your uniform and you're just like us, but you're out here oppressing us, and you're holding this man who needs medical attention, trying to arrest him. Like, he's not well, like he needs help or he's going to die in custody. And the officer actually starts to cry. He backs up, tells the people who he's with, he's like, I'm out. And he gets someone else to replace him. I don't know what happened after that. He just kind of was in the background for a while, but it was like, you know, the cops know that what they're doing is wrong. Like we know that this is not okay. This is not how you treat a human being. But here it is. This is how they're treating a human being.
And I wanted to ask you a little bit. I know you mentioned that they made a wall around, like I'm assuming a wall of people around these police officers and this individual.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm looking at this image it's on my right side of him actually on the ground, you know, how close did you have to get to that? Like, were you actually listening to what the police were saying? Like, were you in earshot?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. With the participatory photography kind of thing, like we're right in it. We have like we just got vests, so we had like press passes and different stuff. And then the cameras, so they tend to give a little bit of leniency or like kind of care less about what we're doing. But I'm not like crossing the police line or anything. So I'm like, I think this one, they hadn't made the line yet. And so I was about as close as I could get without another officer standing there, like pushing me back. And that's all just kind of the same kind of thing as how you find an image. It's just you're trying to pay attention, you know, be aware of your surroundings, see what their energy is and how close you can get, and maybe take a step closer and see what they do. And snap a couple pictures and take another step closer, and then you see them look over at you and you're like, okay, well, maybe that's as far as we'll go. But yeah, we were right there.
And you actually kind of answered a little bit my next question. I was going to ask if you ever had like a negative experience while trying to get an image, like if you were ever treated poorly by the police in particular.
Yeah, for sure. Especially at first, I would just show up and fly the drone because I had the qualifications and the certificates and everything. They would always give me a hard time for it. And so finally I brought paperwork and I like sent it to them. I was like, I can do this. Like, I have the paperwork, I have the documentation. And I was like, is there any law in Pittsburgh about drones? And they were like, well, just what the FAA says. And I was like, okay, if it's what the FAA says, I can do this. And then since then, they're like, okay, yeah, you're good to fly. So don't give me a hard time for that anymore. But I was like, every time, be like, oh, yeah, it's okay if you fly over here, but don't do it over here. Like one of the protests, there's a incident, some agitators were there. And so I just put the drone on top of where they were, like not directly over, but just observing that situation. And then some officers came over like, oh yeah, you need to take the drone down. I was like, actually I don't, but in that instance, sometimes it's better just to take it down and save the fight for another day. Unfortunately, nothing happened there, so there wasn't anything to capture. But a couple of those there's one instance, and this is kind of interesting. So we were at a protest at the city county building, and they have the motorcycle police as the traffic, like blocking traffic outside of the protest. There's already people at the protest who block traffic, so it's kind of redundant, but they do their thing. So I saw a black man down there talking to the police. I'm like looking over. It looks kind of calm. I'm like, I'm gonna walk over and see what's happening. So I just casually walk over, and my phone out, filming. And then both this dude and the police start like berating me about, oh, you're bad for the movement, and why are you doing this? I was like, I'm just documenting what you guys are doing. Like, I didn't say anything. I didn't act. Like I casually walked up. It's like, I'm just documenting what's happening. Like, and that's something that I think is important, is that police are public servants. So they're essentially our employees. So we have every right to film what they're doing. And if they're doing good stuff, then that's good for them because that's what they're supposed to be doing. And if they're doing bad stuff, they just shouldn't be doing that. So they should never have an issue with anybody documenting them. And if they do, then it probably means that they're trying to do something nefarious. I just thought it was so interesting, like such hostility. Like, I didn't even do anything. They're like, oh, why are you doing this? All that kind of stuff. I'm like, just film what you guys are doing. Like, don't do stupid stuff, and then there won't be stupid stuff to film. So that was an interesting experience. Outside that, there was also in Louisville, there was one point, like, we were on the sidewalk, because they made it very clear that if you're on the road, you get arrested. And if you're on the sidewalk, you're probably okay. I was like, I don't want to get arrested today. So we were on the sidewalk, and but there was a line of riot police that came from the other side of the road. They start coming around and like trying to, it's called kettling, to like force people into a certain area. And I've came within a couple feet of them, and I'm like trying to get these images and back up, because I also don't want to get stuck behind the police line. And with that specific sweep, I was able to get like skirt and kind of get out. There was one lady who was just delivering water to the people up front. Louisville is a hot day. It was the summer, so she's bringing a case of water up, and then she's trying to get out of there. And she's trying to get out as they come in, and they almost didn't let her out. And she's like crying and just like, I was just giving them water. Like, I'm on the sidewalk. I'm doing everything it's supposed to be doing. And then they were still giving her a hard time. Finally, they did let her go. I was like, wow, they're almost going to like beat this lady for giving people water. Like, that's not cool. Other than that, I haven't had too many personal negative experiences in that respect. Like, I have some friends out in Portland who are journalists, and they've gotten arrested, they've gotten tear gas, they've gotten shot with rubber bullets, they've had one of them, police broke her finger. Like, we don't see that too much in Pittsburgh, unfortunately.
Thank you. And then we have this one.
This one was, so it was on the protest. I think this was the Thursday one, for trans visibility. And before this image was taken, we were down doing one of the circles, and it's a pretty common thing. I don't know. We didn't see it in Louisville. We didn't see it in DC, but they were different. So I don't know if it's a common thing elsewhere, but we're literally, they're just like circle up, and then everybody sits down, and people give speeches and stuff and block off a whole intersection. So we're doing that, people are talking, and there's this Black woman who's there, and she's just kind of walking around, like she was just there, and she didn't have any shoes on, and she's walking around. And one of the things that's really important is the phrase "all Black lives matter." And it's like all of them. Like, you can't just pick and choose, like, oh, just this or these or whatever. It's like, so they were like, this person's not bothering us, they're just here, like, don't worry about them. And then someone took their socks off, gave them their socks, and then this person took their shoes off. I was like, what size shoe are you? And they had the same size. They're like, here are my shoes. Literally gave them their shoes. People were given money, clothes, like, off their back. And so when that actually happened, I have a couple of images, but I didn't want to be too invasive in that instance. So later, when we were back up at the city council building, I saw that they obviously still didn't have their shoes on, and tried to capture that just as a way to show that these protesters are literally taking their shoes off and giving them to people in need. Yeah.
Thank you. I have one as well.
This is the one I was talking about at the beginning. I'd say I'm probably most proud of, just because it's kind of a calm image. Like, the riot police are actually relatively relaxed. Usually they'll come out with baton in hand, like hitting them, like this is their baton, they'll come out like ready to hit people. The first time I was there, when they came out, like they came looking for a fight. They didn't come to stop anything. They didn't come to enforce the law. They came looking for a fight. And the fight wasn't there, which is why they knocked over some poor girl who was just standing there. This was the day, I think, I don't know the time, this was shortly after they had made different changes into who was in charge from the police's perspective of the protests. And so they came out a little calmer, but they still came out. It's not like they're casual or anything, like very militant, very in order. You can't see, but there's a guy in the back who has a big backpack, and rubber bullet gun, actually a couple of them usually. But this activist just, they sat down and said, we're not going anywhere, and had their megaphone, still leading chants. And the civil affairs units, they were trying to get rid of the riot police because they didn't call them in. We're not really sure why they showed up that day, because all of the aggression was from one outside agitator and the police. Protesters had no agitation that day. And eventually the riot police did leave, but for me, it's like the framing, and then the center is the activist, and that's what has the standing power in this image. Like the background kind of fades away, and when I look at this, I find myself looking throughout it and seeing it's kind of blurred out, and then you start looking at the police, but then you come back to the main person, and like all the rest just kind of fades away, and you're like, oh, that's what's really important. Like, they're gonna do what they do, and we're gonna do what we do, and hopefully we're on the right side of history at the end of the day.
And you mentioned that you haven't posted it. Can you tell a little bit why you chose to keep this one? I don't want to say a secret, but you chose to keep it to yourself.
Yeah, so one of the things, there's a lot of different philosophies in terms of like photography like this, and the strict photojournalist is like, you never doctor anything, you never blur anything. Anytime you're manipulating a pixel and doing something like that, you're making it less true, which on one hand I agree with. But also I say, like, the images I take, it's like for the movement first, because I don't work for a news agency or anything like that. I'm not a reporter. Like, I'm just a guy with a camera who believes in the cause and wants to document stuff that's not being documented, but that's actually happening. So I'm very conscious of the impact that my images could have. There's been a couple people who they'll use images and then actually wind up arresting them based on images that people took. So I try and be very selective and careful. And if I ever think that an image could do harm to somebody, I just don't post it. There's been stuff that I posted and someone was like, oh, there's a license plate in this, like, and I'm like, okay, delete. Like, it's definitely, I want to be truthful and document what's happening, but also with this image, I was concerned because you know who that is, and if you're in Pittsburgh, like, you know who that is if you've been to any of the protests. And something that the Pittsburgh police have been doing is charging people with using an instrument of crime. And that instrument of crime is a megaphone, which they're not illegal, so that's really interesting. But they're holding a megaphone, they're sitting on the street, and I sent it to that person. I was like, do whatever you want with this image, if you want to post it or not. But like, I'm not going to post it, just in case someone from the law enforcement wanted to do something and do that. I was like, it's not worth it to have it be out there on all the social media and potentially do harm.
And I noticed on your Instagram, you also kind of have an entire post dedicated to like the megaphone and kind of capturing what it means. And I saw you have it positioned in a different ways. Can you talk a little bit about why the megaphone is seen as an instrument of crime?
Short answer is no, because it doesn't make any sense to me. But basically, like, a little bit of I'll try and unpack it a little bit to give you actual answer. So basically, a little bit of the history was in Pittsburgh, there's a few activists that the police like to target, usually loud and out there leading stuff and vocal, not doing anything wrong or illegal or bad. But the police like to target them for whatever reason. I don't know if it's cut the snake off by the head kind of philosophy, but this one activist, they had gone to the mayor's house, and I believe this was after, there was a number of times we went to the mayor's house. Once, the first time was just, they just showed up at the mayor's house and did their thing. The second time they were actually invited by the mayor, and then they were trying to talk to the mayor, was just saying his same spiel of stuff, and the protesters weren't having it. They were like, no, we need, like, actually talk to us, actually give us like some real, like, concrete stuff here that we can work with. Well, he had enough and he just walked inside, and then they declared that unlawful assembly and tear gassed and shot rubber bullets into the crowd at short range after they kettled them all down one road, told them, okay, go towards this park. So everybody's like, okay, where we have 2 minutes. They set a timer, go down to the park. And then they're in the street. Police like, you can't be in the street, go on the sidewalk. So like, okay. So they get on the sidewalk. And then the police are like, oh, now we're blocking the street. So you guys need to go into the park. So like, just leave if you're blocking the street. Like, we're not blocking the street, but whatever. So they went into the park. As soon as they go into the park, the guy on the police loudspeaker says, park closes at 9. The park doesn't close at 9. They just said this so that they could then immediately justify the use of pepper spray and rubber bullets into this crowd to disperse people. And I believe it was after that protest, either before or after, but surrounding there, they went back to the mayor's house just on their own in their car, and they were using their megaphone. In that post, you see I speak to how the megaphone is a tool to amplify your voice, and kind of talked a little bit about how like people who protest, you protest because your voice isn't being heard. So megaphone's the tool for that. It amplifies your voice. It's a tool that does that. So he was doing that and not breaking any laws, and they made up some warrants that weren't actually processed till after he was arrested. And there's some people that showed up because he was just there by himself at first. There's like 20 cop cars that show up for one dude, and it's not like he's a big dude either. Like, you don't need that much. And one of the guys who showed up and is filming, he asked the cop, he's like, what's this dude, like, why is this dude going to be arrested? Like, what are you doing here? And he said, oh, he has an instrument of crime. And the guy's like, what does he have? Like, he doesn't have anything. He said, oh, so it's a megaphone. The guy on the camera is like, megaphones aren't illegal. And the cop, like, this is the quote that the cop says. He says, oh, well, now they are. He says, well, now they are. And I was looking, there is some precedent for megaphone usage in residential areas, but it's very weak and it's not anything substantive. Most of it, I think, would fall under free speech, and you're just amplifying your free speech. Since then, there's been a number of other protesters that have been charged with the same crime of instrument of crime being a megaphone. So I don't know if that's just a tactic they're trying to use, because there's also been protesters. There was a protester who was charged for stuff that happened on a day that they weren't even in the city, and they went to court for it, and they were like, yeah, we don't have anything. We don't have anything, sorry. Like, you're free to go. So they're just trying to find stuff to charge these people with, to either slow down the movement or to hold up resources or whatever their purpose is. And so I think the megaphone is one of them, because obviously if you're going to do a protest, the first thing is like, okay, we need a megaphone and we need signs. And then by criminalizing the megaphone, then they can just at will say, oh yeah, you're in trouble for this one just because of the megaphone, just because we don't like what you had to say. So I don't know if that's a real reason. I don't know if we'll ever get a real reason to why they try and criminalize voice speech amplification, but that's been, from my perspective, kind of how it's gone.
And at this time, Abdi kind of has something that he has to do, so I have to leave a little bit early. So Abdi, if you are available, you can do your closing remarks for him.
Yeah, before I left, I just want to kind of touch up on that point where people are getting charged for, like, just having a platform to share their voice, using having a tool to kind of amplify their voice, which I really find it funny, because when the police, have their microphones, yelling from their cars, when they're, shouting at these protesters, and, there's not really any repercussions to that, but I'm using something, that I can buy legally, that I can use legally. I'm not disturbing their peace because there's no peace. So that's just like, what I wanted to say with that. it just really baffles me because I didn't really know, that was a tactic used against, protesters. I just thought it was more of like, okay, people are getting arrested for, the media portrayal was like people getting arrested for looting, for, breaking and entering, but like that was probably like 5 minutes. And that was probably someone coming from, kids coming from downtown, just joining the movement that weren't part of the plan, that weren't probably even contacted to go. It was just, it's a public area. People are gonna do, like, it's hard to kind of like know who's in the movement or who's not, but who's in the movement. You just decide to, you see what you want. And to the media, seeing it's like you're projecting this to the whole world. But yeah, I much appreciate, everything that you said so far. Like, really, I have to do more work on Pittsburgh and research because, yeah, this is wild. So yeah, just like bring awareness, and I'm hoping not to share this out to everyone else because there's a lot of valuable information here, a lot of unhidden gems and messages people don't know about. But yeah, I very much appreciate this, bro. And, glad for all the work that you're doing, hidden perspective. That's what I'm just saying, hidden perspective.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate everything that you're doing and making this platform and all the work that you're doing at Allegheny and beyond. And keep it up. And thanks for giving me this ability to speak about what I've been experiencing and what's going on.
Yeah, love and respect.
Love and respect.
All right, now it's going to be you and me for the remainder of the podcast. So I want to actually jump from the photos, stop screen share, and I want to jump into your Instagram in particular, your videos. Yeah. Let me screen share again. Let's see. Let's go to Safari. We'll go here. I don't know what you can see. Okay. You should be able to see your Instagram. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I can see that.
Perfect. So I'm going to go to this video and then I'll talk about it, and then I'll jump to the other video as well.
Okay.
And then I'll let it play and then we'll go from there. Now, can you tell me a little bit about why you chose to take that video in particular?
Yeah, so I'll kind of lead up to it because the whole reason I'm filming this is because I was filming earlier and then it just kind of continued. So it started in the South Side, like the South Side Works area, went down, went onto the Birmingham Bridge, and I was with one of the other guys I shoot, Dan Lampman, who is a great photographer as well. And we were going onto the bridge and I was like, oh, this is going to make for some incredible photos. And the bridge is somewhat similar to the bridge that John Lewis marched on, and their infamous march. And so I was like, oh wow, there's like, speaking of the historical context, is like this is the Pittsburgh equivalent of that. Not anticipating that anything like this would happen. And so we go on. There's a couple pictures I have of the protests and the bridge and the city in the background. And but so we're there and the bridge and taking some pictures. I had gotten some drone pictures and then put it away, got some pictures just on the normal camera. And then at one point, so like we marched onto the bridge and it was on one side and both sides were blocked off. Like you can see it's divided right here. And both sides were blocked off to traffic. Most of the protesters were on the one side. Some people were using the other side, get water and stuff to everybody. Then for some reason, like this is not communicated to anybody. They just started letting cars through, and everybody's like, well, hold up a minute, like this isn't safe for us. If they start letting cars through, like that's not cool. So then they went onto the other side and covered both sides of the bridge to make it safe for people there. And then that really angered the police. And then they said, get off the bridge. And there's a whole thing. It was back and forth. So at that point, I'm like, I'm going to put the drone up. Because one of the reasons I have it is like, it's that bird's eye perspective. So this is from the drone. I'm holding it because it was low on battery and it started to land. But I put it up there to get that wide perspective. and in that full video, you can actually see like the protests moving off the bridge and all of that, doing what the police said. And then so like off the bridge, and they gathered at the bottom of the bridge, and as the protest is moving up, things are kind of hectic. Because at one point the riot police came up. They have vans, like sprinter vans. So the vans came up, and group of them got out, and they got back in once we started going off the bridge. I had the drone up for this, and then once it gets to a certain battery percentage and it knows it can't fly much longer, it just lands. So it keeps recording, and it just slowly lowers wherever it was. So it's lowering. I'm trying to catch up to it, and I start holding it, and stuff was going on. And I was like, I need to keep recording. I don't know what's happening, what's going to happen. I just need to keep recording. So I was actually on the other side. I walked down. The other protesters are to the left. You can't see the main group in this video. I kind of do like a pass through everybody and see stuff. And then I'm on the sidewalk, like behind where I would be filming this. And a group of riot police come. And this was when I was saying they came looking for a fight. They came walking how you walk if you're going to look for a fight. One dude who, being in the moment, I didn't know what he said. He said, you must disperse. I have no idea what he said in the moment. It took me watching the video like a dozen times to figure that out. But so they came in. I'm like, well, definitely documenting what they're going to do, just because, this was end of July, the beginning of July. They had tear gassed people for no reason, rubber bullets, the whole thing. So I'm like, oh great, here they come again, like it's going to go down. And I was on like the sidewalk, and then there's like a bend to get onto the bridge. They go around the bend, and then I hear them start running. So I whip the camera over and start running over to see what's happening. And they're going up to, I don't even know what. There's a couple people who were leaving the bridge. Maybe they're going up to them. This individual, we actually see in the longer video, which I don't have on here, but they're just walking up because the police are going there. They're just going to document, which they're perfectly legally able to do. And this guy had an issue with it. And this one I don't think has audio because the drone doesn't record audio. But the first cop, he says, back up 1 second before shoving her. The second cop, he says, back up as he's shoving her. So they didn't even give her a chance to peacefully leave. They're just, like I said, looking for a fight. And this was a situation that was unfolding so rapidly. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to get this shot or I see this happening. It was like, I'm just filming whatever I can and trying to still be aware of the surroundings and pay attention to, like if something's going to go down. And I saw him point, that first guy, and then I see that. So I see these things like, and then the protesters and the police getting closer. I'm like, that's not good. So I try and focus it there. And I'll say a lot of luck was there to get that shot. Unfortunate that it had to happen at all. But I think if this video didn't get out, that I probably would have gotten swept under the rug, because it kind of still got swept under the rug, because I don't think any of those officers were actually reprimanded for their actions that day. They said they were going to do stuff, and then as far as I know, nothing ever happened. But it was just a matter of like, make sure the camera's rolling and document whatever you can. And yeah.
And, I have a question in particular. Do you ever have any sense of like fear or nervousness when it comes to going and recording events, especially when you're seeing commotions like this occur?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I think if you don't, then you got something a little bit screwed up. But I do a lot of climbing, and so climbing is outside of being a physical thing. It's a constant assessment of risk and what risk is worth taking and what the reward is, and what risk is just not worth taking. And so that's another thing that I'm constantly doing when I'm out there. It's like, okay, what's the risk here? Like, I know my rights as a person, I know my rights as someone who's taking pictures and documenting, but I also understand that that's not always accepted or not always honored. So there definitely is that, like, in the back of your mind, like, well, what is today going to be the day? Like, are they going to say screw the press and whatever? But especially like in a moment like this, you're so focused on getting the document, like documenting what's happening and getting the shots, that kind of becomes secondary. So it's like, first, like, how can we get the shots, and then that sort of goes away. But it comes back for sure. And after I put this out, I was like kind of nervous the next time to go out. I was like, oh boy, like, it's obviously not a good look for them because they did a terrible thing. And I wonder what the reaction is going to be if I show up. Like, are they going to be extra aggressive or something? Or so you just don't know. But yeah, there's definitely some fear there, but it's all calibrated, I guess would be a good way to put it. And constantly assessing, is the situation safe? And then I also have certain personal protective equipment that I carry with me. So like a mask and stuff, and goggles. They use tear gas and whatnot. So you can still document if they do that kind of stuff.
And have you ever been at a protest where they use the tear gas?
I have not. I've a few times been at a protest where they show up and we put the masks on, like, because they have their masks and whatnot, but never have actually gotten gassed myself.
Okay, thank you. And then let me find the other one. Oh my goodness, here we go. And then let me know if you can hear the audio, because on the podcast, if you can't hear it, they can't hear it either.
Okay. Ooh, it just cut out. I think the audio just cut out. It was there at the beginning.
Hold on. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try one more time.
Okay.
Trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
Play in the background just about the.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about why you chose to have like sign language?
Yeah, so this one was actually the brainchild of Ime Alaquiva, guy who I mentioned to do a lot of work with. Him and his daughter wanted to do something that they both didn't know, so that they're kind of at the same level, because there's usually that like superior inferior kind of relationship with a parent and a child. So they're like, let's find something that we're both new at to kind of level that. And so they started doing sign language, I think maybe like a year or so ago. And he's another one like who documents a lot of protests, and definitely, I would say, kind of got me into that in a sense. And but he was filming and then going home and editing and doing stuff. And his daughter said, he's like, I don't see any sign language, any deaf people in your images. It's like, what, like, their voice needs to be heard too, or their words need to be heard too. And that really struck him. And so he that night wrote the script and came up with the idea, and then worked with a couple sign language translators and made the connections. And a lot of protests, sometimes they'll have interpreters there, sign language interpreters there. So these are some of the people that you see. And then just other people in the deaf community. But it's in this pursuit of justice, it's like I said earlier, all Black Lives Matter. It's like deaf Black Lives Matter, blind Black Lives Matter. And so it's important. This is not a story that was being told. And so he said, we have to tell it. I was like, yes, absolutely. How can I help? And want to put built the website for this and help with some of just the production and behind the scenes kind of stuff. But I said it's definitely his brainchild, and something I'm very proud to be a part of and to help out with, and especially people who they have a voice but literally don't have a voice. Like, so it just goes back to like what we're doing. Documenting is giving a voice to the voiceless and amplifying the voices that need to be amplified.
Thank you. I'm gonna pull up one more.
Mm-hmm.
Is liberation for all. From whence does fulfillment come? And I expel from this mortal shell. We're at death the living love. We're not fighting a system for one person or one race. It's just a system set against us.
We are officially one person, one community, one city, one Lorenzo.
It's my idea. We stand with you. We stand with you. We stand.
Can you tell me a little bit about this?
Yeah, so this was the guy, he was the one who was the first one charged with the megaphone as an instrument of crime. And this was before this video, but it was one of the first activists to get charged, and I think he might have been the first who had to turn himself in this series. There's a whole history of activism in Pittsburgh that I need to learn more about, but in this like series of like this summer, he's one of the first. And I had heard about that there was going to be a group going down for court support. I reached out to Eman. I was like, "Yo, we got to go. Like, this is one of those moments that, like, in the timeline, like, this is like in my mind. I'm like like thinking ahead, like looking back. I'm like, this is one of those moments, like, one of those pivotal moments where you have someone like he turned himself in that day for the charges. I think a lot of them wound up getting expunged and whatnot. He's still. Like he has another court date set on December 4th or 7th, I believe, which is like they just lumped all his charges together. But it was something where I was like, we need to go document this, and to absolutely so show up, and a lot of people out there to support. And there's still activists who are turning themselves in or have court dates and whatnot, and there's still court support. It's not as much as this one, not as many people, but people still do show up, do what they can. But like, especially for someone like that, he's like, I think 23, 24, so a young guy, and believes in the cause and believes that the way that this country does stuff isn't right. And so he's willing to put his life on the line and fight for that, and then gets all these erroneous charges for it, and all these consequences that, like, he's just trying to make the world a better place for people, and then winds up having to spend time in jail. And it's like, you're making the world better for people like that, you shouldn't be punished for that. Really like important to support, and then also to document, and like just how ridiculous it is. And you see, like, it was like 14 charges or whatnot at the beginning, and it's like, what did he do? He spoke on a megaphone, talked loud, like screamed Black Lives Matter. Like, that shouldn't be controversial. but yet there's a big issue with it. So it's been interesting to see how it has evolved since then, because I remember being such a thing. I was like, oh, this is probably going to be the only one, and it's far from it, unfortunately. But
Thank you. I'm gonna stop sharing this screen.
yeah,
I'll actually turn on my video since Abdi's not here,
cool.
the video side. But I want to talk to you a little bit about what social justice means to you.
Sorry, what was that?
Sorry, somebody is like revving their engine outside my house.
Nice.
So, can you tell me a little bit about what social justice means to you?
Yeah. Social justice to me is a super blanket term. It's like same with activism. It's like there's so many different avenues for that kind of work and what that looks like. And to some people, it's like going out in the streets and marching, and some people, it's never going out, but it doesn't mean that they're not an activist or not supporting social justice causes. And it's like, to break it down the most, I would say it's just a way, or it's if you care about people and you recognize that certain people don't have the same experiences that you do, and that's due to things outside of their control. Like certain people have very different experiences because of their skin color than other people, and that's not fair at all. That shouldn't be how it is. So once you recognize that and you start trying to do stuff to break down those systems that support that, then that's social justice, that's activism. And that could be calling people representatives, it could be writing letters, it could be donating, it could be posting, it could be showing up, it could be see somebody in a tough spot and pulling over and say, hey, how can I help? Like, do you need anything? Even simple stuff like that, or someone on the side of the street, oh, do you need a sandwich? Like, you need something, like just that. It's just being a good person, I think, is really what it comes down to, and caring about people. And there's no one, like, in my mind, there's no one, like, oh, you do A, B, and C, and you're a social justice activist. It's much broader than that.
And when you're thinking about the work that you're doing and the documentation that you're doing with the Black Lives Matter protest, would you consider yourself an activist?
I don't know if I'd give myself that title, just because I feel like that's like, I go out and do the work, and if people interpret it as that, then like, cool. Like, I try to just go out and document what's happening and amplify those voices that aren't being heard, and give that platform, make sure that in instances where the big media puts out those stories that are not accurate or half truths or false or whatever, that I'm there to document it. So if that's activism, then like, that's cool. But I don't go out and being like, oh, I'm an activist today, like I'm gonna go do that. To me, it's just being a good person and caring about people. Yeah.
And would you say that's what's missing from the media, that they just don't care, it's more for profit?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big part that's missing. Like we see the news people there and how they interact with people, and they just don't care. Like, they're just there to. Sometimes there's some reporters, they'll come up and they'll say, oh, I just have to try, and then the protesters are like, yeah, no, you're not welcome because of what your news agency does with the images. And then some of them are like, yeah, I get it, and then they go. But some of them are just like, well, I have a right to be here and to film, and it's like a whole thing. But I think that caring aspect, and empathy is definitely missing, especially in the higher ups, people who are making the decisions and telling the reporters what they need to capture and how they need to do it.
And I'm going to lump sum everything that we've talked about tonight a little bit. And can you tell me why you go out, why you do what you do, and a little bit of what Black Lives Matter means to you?
Yeah. So to me, Black Lives Matter is pretty straightforward. It's a fact. Black Lives Matter. There's been many efforts throughout the history of our country and the world to develop beliefs that they don't. And so it's important to speak that and to make that a reality for everybody. I mean, in Pittsburgh, you have more kids going to prison from school. Like the prison to, or the school to prison pipeline is very real, and it's worse in Pittsburgh than almost anywhere else in the country. Yet we're the most livable city in America. So it's like, but why are you sending kids to jail? Like that kind of stuff. So it's like there are these, to me, obvious issues and obvious avenues for improvement. And yeah, some of it's going to take more work, and it's maybe not a easy answer for some things. For some things it is, and they just, people who make the laws don't see that. But so I think like that's important. That's what keeps bringing me out, and something I try and put on every post. Might not get everyone, but I try and put it on everyone, is no justice, no peace. And it's one of the classic marching slogans. And I think it's just that's true. Like we've seen, it's like one of the, well, probably, I think it was the biggest social movement this summer. Like more people across the world went out and marched in the streets. Nothing's really changed since then, but the marches now are much smaller and much less people are involved. So it's like, well, why did you go out in the first place? Like there's a lot of different reasons why people do and why they don't anymore, and not to shame anybody for not going out. But it's like, if you believed in it, nothing really changed, but now you're not. Like where's the same support? So for me, it's like, I'm going to keep going out as long as I can, and until there's justice. I mean, you have people who murdered Breonna Taylor who got charged with shooting a wall. So like that's not anywhere close to justice. The George Floyd's murderer made bail and he's walking on the streets. Like that's not justice. I don't care if his bail is $1 million or not. Like he's a murderer and shouldn't be walking around on the streets. And it's these like systems of oppression that haven't really changed much. And something I was thinking about and saying a lot when the protests first happened, like this moment in history is too important to let slip by. And it's like we're almost at that point where we're letting it slip by a little bit. And so that's why I think it's important to me personally to keep going out and documenting. And it's like, this is still happening. The issues are still there. Like it's still important. Black lives still matter until we see justice for everybody. And we should still be doing stuff.
Thank you so much. And I very much appreciate you coming for our podcast and speaking to us and telling us about your experience with the Black Lives Matter protest. At this time, I'm going to conclude the podcast, but if you have any parting words, we can go from there.
I think I'll just say, do what you can. There's people all over the country fighting wherever you are. Reach out to different organizations. See who you can help. If you can buy them a shirt or a teddy bear or donate money to them. There's a lot of bail funds. There's a lot of activists. Just because I'm in Pittsburgh, I know in Pittsburgh, a lot of activists who are specifically facing charges, Gam, Lorenzo, and a number of others who are in need of resources. So support where you can, do what you can. And then also, I always say, like, all government's local. Like right now, the national election is like very important, and it's very important that people vote. But at the end of the day, like normally what impacts people is local government. And that even boils down to like how you interact with your community members and on a one-on-one level and on a group level. So be active, and if you can help somebody, help them. Educate yourself. Yeah, it's been a big journey for myself. Just learning about the history of oppression and what's happening. And my mom as well, she's like, I'm learning so much this summer. She didn't know what fascism was. And it's like, that stuff's crazy. And the resources are out there. So if anybody is looking for resources, I'd be happy to point them in a direction if I could. But yeah, help whatever local groups are doing stuff. If you don't feel comfortable going out on the streets, like that's cool, but there's other ways you can help. You can listen to police scanners, you can donate, yeah, any number of things. So do what you can, and hopefully if everybody does something, then someday we won't have to go do this anymore.
Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.